Welcome everyone to the easy and delicious answer to cooking at home burnout with Alaska Seafood Marketing Institute. We're thrilled to have you here and share more about cooking seafood from frozen. So in the spirit of time, let's go ahead and get going. Again, I think I said my name's Monica George. I'm head of retail marketing with ASMI. Apologize if I didn't get that out right away. Okay. So by this time in the pandemic, most of your shoppers are feeling this way. What to make, how to make it healthy and simple. So we're excited today to share with you a super delicious, healthy, and easy way to help your customers with their cooking at home fatigue. But first, let me share a little bit about who we are. Oh, I apologize, I didn't have that. That was the help, that was the thing. Okay. We are Alaska Seafood Marketing Institute. We are a marketing board that works to increase the consumption of seafood from Alaska and awareness of Alaska as the world's most trusted source of premium, quality, healthy, and sustainable wild-caught seafood. The key thing to remember is we don't sell products. We're here to provide education, assets, promotional partnership assistance to you. So we assist retailers, nutritionists, food service operators, and distributors through various education and promotion programs. And that's all in partnership with Alaska fishermen, processors, in the state of Alaska. Next thing to remember is that we are always wild. All Alaska seafood is wild by law. There's no fish farming in Alaska. Alaska produces 2/3 of the nation's harvest, and our commitment to sustainable management has allowed the state's fisheries to produce large, diversified harvests for many decades. And I'll run through our species super quick. Most people don't realize that there are 5 different species of wild salmon in Alaska, each with its own specialness, flavor profile, and nutrient content. And you can see, again, that variation right through these photos. I love this diagram just to give you an idea of the variety. And again, all of the 5 species are wild. Here's a nice demo of our whitefish. Again, just showing you the different varieties that we have in Alaska. Right there up in the corner, wild Alaska pollock, which you'll often see in fish and chips. Same with Pacific cod. And then halibut front and center, known as the steak of Alaska seafood. Gorgeous, nice whitefish, nice and flaky. You've probably seen that in the market. Sablefish, also known as black cod. Perhaps you've tried some miso black cod. And we have a wide variety of sole, flounder, and rockfish. And shellfish. Alaska, of course, is known for Alaskan king crab right up there in the corner. And then we also have golden king crab, snow crab, Dungeness crab, weather vane scallops, spot prawns, and oysters. So hopefully that gives you a good idea of the wide variety of Alaska species that you may be seeing out in the market. So let's jump right into it. It is seafood's time. Your customers want it. Amid the past year's unstable food service and retail landscape, seafood has become one of grocery's strongest players, catalyzing strong overall category growth by offering solutions to some of shoppers' top priorities, such as health and wellness, ease of preparation and quality. And this interest is translating into seafood sales. So you can see these numbers here. And just want you to know that with this growth, like we're here to support your consumers and you in promoting Alaska seafood. So that, we're also reporting that frozen seafood sales grew an astounding 36%. And that's because customers are filling their freezers with seafood like never before. As they're cooking from home at unprecedented amounts, frozen seafood has become, a great answer for the cooking fatigue that is set in. So there's good news, and that's why we're all here today. It isn't necessary to defrost frozen seafood before cooking it. Alaska seafood can be prepared right from the freezer using simple, familiar methods like baking, roasting, searing, pressure cooking, and air frying. No planning required, which is music to ears to all of us that are preparing dinner at the last minute at home. So Cook It Frozen cuts down on food waste, and all too often, as some of you may have experienced, customers thaw frozen fish for the next day, and then life happens, and we discover that in the refrigerator days later, that it's too late to use and it ends up in the trash can. So Cook It Frozen solves that. And lastly, Cook It Frozen offers shoppers wild-caught, sustainable seafood sourced from Alaska year-round that is simple to prepare. So you will see we've talked a lot about resources that we have with Alaska Seafood throughout this conference. And here you'll see some videos that we have on our website showing how simple this technique really is and that no thawing is required. So you can take the Alaska Seafood from the freezer, briefly run it under cold water, begin roasting, grilling, air frying, steaming, pressure cooking. Halfway through cooking, season the dish and resume cooking. It's that simple. And videos and recipes. Here are just a few examples of the numerous Cook It from Frozen videos and recipes we have available on our website, all designed to show how simple it is to cook it from frozen, helping ease the cooking home fatigue everyone is experiencing. And we have many more that are shown here and not shown here, available for your use with your shoppers. And don't take our word for it. Look what the recipe doctor Elaine did with Cook It Frozen. Here are 3 beautiful recipes that she created with Alaska Seafood, cooking directly from frozen. And Elaine is in the chat, so please feel free to reach out to her to talk about more of her experience with cooking it from frozen for the first time. And better than talking about it, let's see Cook It and Frozen in action. I'm so pleased to welcome Alaska fisherman Melanie Brown, who will be demoing how to cook it frozen with Alaska salmon in the air fryer. So I am going to stop sharing my screen and turn it over to Melanie.
Guyana Monica, in Yupik, that means thank you. Guyana Dailuchi means thank you very much for being here. My Yupik name is Taikuba. It means somebody who came from far away, because I had to travel all the way from Sitka, Alaska to visit Bristol Bay and meet my extended family for the first time. And my great-grandmother gave me my native name. So I'm going to tell you more about myself after I get this piece of fish started. I'm going to start by preheating my air fryer. Sorry to do it in this order, but I want to be able to do this recipe in real time. You'll see this piece of fish finished before I'm done talking. So I'm going to cut this piece of fish out of its portion-sized wrapper. And it is a piece of sockeye. It's probably from Bristol Bay, because Bristol Bay is the most abundant source of wild sockeye salmon in the world. So I am doing a slight variation, and I am not going to run this piece of fish under cold water. I found that I end up with really good results when I do not do that. So these air fryers, they preheat very quickly. I'm just going to put the salmon in. I'm not going to dress it or season it for the first half of its cooking time. And I have so there's a time dial and there's a temperature dial. And I have my temperature just a hair under 400 to achieve the temperature of 390 degrees. I found that it's an ideal temperature for the way that I enjoy my salmon. Okay, so now that that's started, I'm going to set my for 7 minutes. I would recommend that you use a precise timer, because this dial, it's kind of hard to tell exactly where the time is at. But I never used an air fryer before I started learning how to cook it frozen. And so that was something that was kind of interesting for me, to be able to just add something new to my cooking sort of, techniques and everything. But we have some time. I'm just going to talk a little bit about my background. I've been commercial fishing in Bristol Bay since the age of 10. I'm connected to Bristol Bay through my mother, who was born in the town called Naknek, which is named for the river. And I commercial fish on a set net site using gill net gear, and I operate my site out of a small open skiff. It's a 20-foot skiff, and I fish with my children. They're my crew, and they represent the fifth generation of commercial fishermen in my family. My great grandfather Paul Chacon, he was the first commercial fisherman in our family. He started out during the sailboat era in Bristol Bay, and then as he started getting older and he got tired of rowing when there was no wind, he staked out a set net site once people came up with that form of fishing. And it's that site that I continue to fish to this day outside the mouth of the Naknek River. And actually a number of ASMI representatives came and visited my site a couple of summers ago. It was really fun taking them out, and we saw some beluga whales go by the site because it was in the early season before all the commercial fishing boats were in the water. And so the beluga really, they were chasing the early salmon upriver. And so that was a really special kind of thing to share with a group of people who are new to Bristol Bay and the magic of that place. So all 5 species do return to Bristol Bay, all 5 of the species that Monica was talking about, but the most abundant species is sockeye salmon. The fishery has been in existence. The commercial fishery was established in 1886. And it is still sustainable. It is still abundant as well. Last year and many years prior to that, Bristol Bay returned over 50 million sockeye salmon. And it's a testament to the management regime of Bristol Bay, that it's managed under the sustained yield principle. And also the fact that Bristol Bay that the habitat is so unperturbed. You can only fly or boat there. There are no roadways that go to Bristol Bay. So it's pretty remote. And I think that's something that really helps to maintain the health of that habitat and environment. So when you choose to eat wild sockeye salmon, you're making a really good choice as a consumer. By supporting the fishermen who prosecute the fishery, but also you're making a really good sustainable choice. And it really is nice that it's one of the silver linings, as Monica mentioned, of the COVID pandemic, that it's driven more consumers to seek out really healthy seafood sources. So now let's talk about the air fryer and the preparation. I think I mentioned that I set this for 390 degrees, just a hair under 400. And there are some recipes that call for, when you have to do the halfway, take the fish out halfway, there's a temperature adjustment that's suggested. But I found that when I use this temperature, that's just a hair under 400, I don't have to adjust the temperature when I pull the fish after the first 7-minute cycle. So it's one less thing that you have to remember, in terms of like changing the temperature out. And really there's no way around it. I experimented with a number of things. There's really no way around having to pull the fish out halfway through. But I was just trying to come up with something that was as simple as possible. But if you put a piece of fish in that's dressed and seasoned from the start in an air fryer, because it is such an intense cooking environment, you're going to end up with whatever you put on top just getting totally scorched. So that's why you have to put the fish in first to deglaze it, to get it up to temperature and fully thawed, and then you can dress it halfway through. I'm going to be dressing the salmon with some very simple ingredients. It's really easy and swift to do. I start by adding a little bit of olive oil with a cooking brush. That helps to kind of seal up the fish and add a little bit of richness from the fat of the oil. And I use just a little pinch of sea salt, and onion powder. I find is just a really compatible seasoning for fish. Onion and any seafood onion powder and any seafood really go well together. I find that garlic is a little bit overpowering for fish. But that's just my opinion. If you like garlic, by all means, you should use it. And I'm going to use what I have left of last year's wild blueberry harvest. I love wild blueberries, and I love marrying salmon with the bounty of the land. But you can use any preserve that maybe you have created yourself. Okay, we're done with our first cycle. Okay, so I'm gonna stop the timer. And the nice thing about air fryers is that they stop cooking as soon as you open the door. Excuse me. And then you pull out your tray. And so now I'm just gonna brush it with a little bit of olive oil. Add the pinch of sea salt. Lightly dust it with the onion powder. And then just add not too ample spoon of the blueberry preserves and spread it around a little bit. It adds a wonderful blaze of color and a blast of flavor and just a touch of sweetness. I'm just going to warn you right now, it is going to scorch and blacken a little bit, but not to the point where you end up with charcoal. So you don't need to worry about that. Now, I'm going to push the tray back in, bearing in mind that it is not resting on the bottom of the air fryer. It is on the upper setting, the ledge setting. There's a difference. For certain foods in air fryers, you want to have your tray down resting on the bottom. But for this, you want the air circulating as much as possible. So you want to have it on that upper ledge setting in your air fryer. And as soon as I shut the door, I'm going to hit my timer again. So now we have 7 more minutes to talk or let me see. I wanted to mention. So I realize this is a dietitian's conference, and so you're focused on health and nutrition, but I think most of us like to have a bacon treat now and then, and so I'm just going to mention that bacon is a really nice way to enrich the flavor of your salmon if you are not cooking with king salmon, which is king salmon or Chinook, which is the richest of the salmon species. The nice thing about king salmon is if you're lucky enough to get your hands on it, is that it has so much richness that you don't need to do anything to jazz it up, like with the dressing or the jam that I'm using. You certainly don't have to add any extra oil because it is so rich with natural oils. So if you have a piece of king salmon that you're cooking with, you're going to have to adjust your time if it's a thick piece of salmon. But you really only have to add maybe a little pinch of sea salt and maybe onion powder if you like that flavor. But there really isn't anything else that you need to do. But for sockeye salmon, I find that I do like to either use olive oil, but another thing that is really wonderful and a nice way to add a little bit of fat flavor richness is by in the air fryer, you can either take a piece of bacon and some kitchen shears and cut the bacon into little pieces and sort of distribute them on your piece of salmon. I'd say for each portion size piece of salmon, I would recommend using a half a piece of bacon or maybe even a quarter piece of bacon. Um, as soon as the bacon goes in the second, bear in mind, the second half of the cooking, the second 7-minute cycle, that bacon, when it heats up, it's going to release its bacon fat and it's going to help add that oily richness to the salmon and flavor, a smoky flavor. It'll almost kind of fool you into thinking that you're eating smoked salmon if you're using a really smoky bacon. Another thing you can use is maybe some really nice salumi, like a good piece of maybe Genoa or, some other nice fatty piece of sausage or salami, and just lay it out on top of the salmon, on top of your jam. It actually looks really beautiful. So, it's just kind of a nice way to add a little extra flavor. Oops, I need to turn this on again. The timer timed out. Yeah, so according to my timer, this cycle still has about 3.5 minutes. So Monica, I don't know if there's anything that that you feel that you'd like to ask me, or that maybe I didn't cover that you'd like me to talk about, or if this might be a good time to field a short question. I know you're going to be doing Q&A at the end, but
oh yeah, no, this is perfect timing. Thanks for that, because we are going to be running up on time. So this is great. We actually had a question from Andrea. How many fish do you catch in a day on average in Bristol Bay?
Oh, it all depends. I know that's not really an answer, but the fishery in Bristol Bay, it's super intense. The wild run comes in, and like all together, they're schooled up for the most part. The season it lasts about a month, from late June to late July. And in the early season, like I'd say there's kind of like a bell curve. In the early season, it's kind of, the numbers are pretty flat. And then as we approach the peak, the numbers come way up. And then we'll have like a few days of the fishery where it's just super intense. It's really hard to even keep up with the amount of fish that we're catching. And then it starts to usually taper off towards the end. But usually there are about three distinct peaks that happen pretty close to each other during the part of the run, where the fish are all schooled up and really coming in hard. But in the early season, when we clear our gear, I'd say, we'll get like maybe 50 to 100 fish on light days, but on big days, we'll get into the thousands. It's pretty intense, and we're just working constantly, pulling through our gear and clearing it.
Thank you so much. And this is a great follow-up question. Can you speak on seafood, in particular Alaska salmon, and in season? And I assume they're kind of elaborating on what it means for Alaska seafood to be in season.
For it to be in, okay, I if I'm understanding the question correctly, the salmon season, for the most part, it's centered around late spring, summer, and early fall, and it depends on the species. The first fish to come in the spring are the Chinook salmon, and then after them, we start seeing some Kita salmon come in the early season, and then they're eclipsed by the Sockeye, by the like just the sheer volume of the Sockeye. And then as the Sockeye start to taper off, that's when we start to see Kita again. And then the pinks, they come at the end of the season in Bristol Bay, but they only come every other year. They come every 2 years. They're on a 2-year cycle, and I'm not sure what determines that, but pink salmon, they come every other year. Sometimes there are some odd strays. We'll get like maybe one pink salmon in our gear in an off year, but also normally we're wrapped up with our sockeye salmon before the pinks even start showing up. So it's done. So let's take a look at it, and then I'll hand it back to Monica. I forgot to mention that it's, the skin. It's actually a really good thing. Although I mean, it would be really impossible to take it off when you're using cook it frozen technique. But it's really a good thing to leave on because it adds good flavor richness, and then you might even want to try the skin because it gets really crispy in the air fryer. So this is what it looks like. Hopefully I won't tip it over. I'm going to hang on to it from this end. See, the blueberry jam, it looks really beautiful. And then I'm going to push the way that you can flake the fish is you just you push on it with your fork, and then you can get into the fish and see the consistency of it. If it's fully cooked, it's going to flake very easily, and if it's undercooked, it will not flake. But you can see that it's the flake of it and the color. It's really beautiful, and it would be really easy to eat this flake by flake. And the cooking is very even. It doesn't look like it's overdone. So I hope that if you do try using an air fryer, that you'll have fun using this technique. Thank you, Monica. I'm going to hand it back to you now.
Great. Thank you so much, Melanie. That looks so delicious. I cannot wait to try this at home. I also loved that concept of just marrying salmon with the bounty of the land. And also, of course, if we don't have access to those fresh berries, that we can go and get some fresh jam or go to farmer's market and pick up something local there as well. So we really appreciate your time today and sharing your story with everyone and the cook it frozen technique. So thanks so much, Melanie. And with that, I'll just close out quickly as we just have a few minutes left. I'm just going to share my screen again. And let me get my presentation back up for you. We want to leave you with this message that ASMI is your seafood resource. We're here with sustainability, health, and nutrition info, harvesting information, consumer research data, education and training materials. You can see the list goes on. I know I've had the pleasure of talking with many of you today and yesterday about all of these resources. But we hope you learned how easy it is to cook it frozen. And again, we just want to make sure we're your number one seafood resource. So hope you had the chance to take a look at some of the comments from Elaine in the chat. And also want to leave you with this: the first 25 RDs to conduct an Alaska Seafood Cook It Frozen demo and share it on their social channels will get a $100 gift card from us. So please reach out. Here's my email, contact information for any information on how to do that. I hope that you received your Sample Fest bag and you have one of our aprons. Oh, let me stop sharing that. And, it'd be great if you want to do a demo, use one of those aprons, and let me know if you're interested. It looks like we have one more question. These are great questions and we can follow offline as soon as this is ending. But Katie had a question. Maybe you can help with this, Melanie. Is Alaska seafood frozen on the boat? I have a customer who is histamine intolerant and has to know where exactly the fish was frozen.
So it's definitely not frozen on my boat because I just fish out of an open skiff, where I don't have enough carrying capacity to have a freezer unit. It is kind of dependent on what region the fishery is and the gear type as well. There are some fishermen who are able to freeze their fish on board, or they they'll dress it out themselves. They'll process it themselves and freeze it on board. There are others that they'll dress out their fish and then they'll ice it until they bring it in to market. So it is very, very much, situational dependent. I'm sorry I don't have a better answer for you.
Oh, no, that's okay, Melanie. I think that's perfect. I think just showing that, yeah, many of the species of Alaska, as Trisha is saying, that are iced on the boat and then are processed and frozen dockside. And then just sharing, I think this is great, Melanie, to share. There's so many different ways that Alaska seafood can be processed. So we're happy to follow up again offline on that conversation on frozen Alaska seafood. And unfortunately, we are out of time. So yeah, Katie, feel free to send me an email. Anyone else that's interested also in doing Cook It Frozen demos. And we can't thank you enough again, Melanie, for being here. Thank you.
Thank you. It was fun for me.
Okay. All right. Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.